This podcast is made possible by our supporters on Patreon, who pledge an amount to contribute every month and in return get exclusive access to bonus content, merchandise discounts, and much more. If you'd like to join our family, please go to patreon.com/Gotham Variety and subscribe. That's Patreon/Gotham Variety.
Greetings and welcome to the premiere episode of Gotham Hardball on Gotham Variety. My name is Joe Rubenstein, and it is Wednesday, January 1st, 2020. Happy New Year, new decade, new podcast, sort of. I'll explain. And I am just super excited to present Gotham Hardball here on Gotham Variety as we enter what all signs are pointing toward as a new era of Yankee dominance, I think. You know, the 1920s were very good to the franchise. First three championships in 23, 27, and 28. Pennants in 21, 22, and 26. And although, that was a different era, and, dynasties today are far more difficult to achieve, I do believe that with the addition of Gerrit Cole and what I predict will be another season of relative mediocrity for the Boston Red Sox. And I also predict, by the way, some drop-off from the Astros. First of all, that's an aging pitching staff that just went all the way deep into the postseason. Second of all, they will almost certainly be penalized for their disgraceful, disgusting cheating scandal. And still no final word on that, but it looks bad for Houston. And of course, they'll have to hit this season without knowing what's coming. But there does appear to be a bright, shining path opening up for the Bombers that they absolutely must cash in on. Forget dynasties, just win one, all right? I mean, take us to the promised land this year. But before we get to tonight's jam-packed show, just a word about this podcast, which is new and yet is not. So as some of you are aware, I started a podcast called Bronx Bombers exactly 2 years ago, and we released a total of 39 episodes. During the latter half of 2019, I started a second podcast, the one you're listening to, Gotham Variety, a show which features really a little bit of everything, from scripted audio dramas. We've got 5 out already, with number 6 coming on the 15th of January, and those are everything from murder thrillers to war stories. I'll also be doing movie reviews on Gotham Variety. I'll review the new Clint Eastwood movie within the next week or so, and we'll have interviews on a wide range of topics as well. And now this, Gotham Hardball, a baseball podcast with a New York focus. So for new listeners, I am a lifelong Yankee fan, been rooting for the Yankees since '77 when I was 8 years old. But on this show, we'll also talk a bit about the Mets, who I've also followed my whole life. And unlike some Yankee fans who hate them for some reason, I actually root for the Mets as long as they're not playing the Yankees. And I think the Mets are entering an interesting period, which I'll get into later. And we'll also cover here general baseball news from around the league as well, a bit more than I did on Bronx Bombers. So there's that bit of difference. So bottom line, if you are interested in everything we have to offer, not just baseball, but all the other offerings as well, you should follow us on Twitter at Gotham Variety. That will keep you on top of everything we do. And certainly subscribe also to Gotham Variety on Apple Podcasts or really anywhere else you listen to podcasts. If you are just interested in baseball and not the other stuff, follow us on Twitter at Gotham Hardball. I'll keep you posted there on all our new episodes and, of course, all my in-game tweets and various comments as well. We're on Facebook too, but Twitter is definitely the place where I hang out the most. And if you have any questions, any comments about any of this, drop me an email, joe@gothamvariety.com. I'll get right back to you. And yes, we do have a website as well, gothamvariety.com. I have some very cool ideas planned for this podcast, Gotham Hardball, which I'll announce when the time comes, along with some extras for subscribers. But during this off season, you can expect new episodes to drop at the very least on the first of every month. We'll probably have more within the month as well. And I'll probably do some instant reactions to spring training games once they start on February 22nd, which cannot come soon enough. Coming up a little bit later on in our mailbag segment, I answer a question about the Astros cheating scandal, namely what I think their punishment should be. Yes, that's a great question. I don't know, maybe How about a league mandate that the Astros team logo must be changed to a garbage can? But seriously, I am beyond infuriated over what's been going on allegedly down there and the kind of bald-faced lying about it. So we'll get into that. Plus, a question about Dellin Betances, his defection to Queens, and then kind of I'll springboard into my general thoughts on the Mets offseason and their outlook this year. And in just a moment, a fully loaded hot stove report. First, some of the big Yankee stories this offseason, starting, of course, with the Gerrit Cole acquisition, and around the league as well, some marquee pitchers and position players changing cities too. All that and more coming up on today's Gotham Hardball. Back in a moment.
You can follow us on Twitter @Gotham Variety, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. We're on Spotify as well. Check out our website at gothamvariety.com, where you can send us your comments and questions. And if you love what we're doing, we'd love a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Reviews and ratings help keep our show on the charts, so more and more people can find us.
And now here's Joe with this week's main thing.
You know, I thought about doing a post-mortem on the ALCS and that brutal 6-game loss to Houston, where the hitting just went completely south, Sanchez in particular. It's a series where I thought Aaron Boone reverted back to some suspect bullpen usage and just generally kind of dumb moves. Like when we were up 1-0 on the road and had a lead in game 2, and he pulls Chad Green, who was rested and dealing, for Adam Ottavino, who promptly surrendered the lead on a towering home run to Springer. That extra inning win by Houston really changed the entire complexion of the series, with Cole pitching Game 3 at the stadium. And with Ottavino, whose career postseason ERA is now 6.43, this was a protracted postseason meltdown. And honestly, it didn't surprise me that much. He had a good regular season, but he was constantly having to wiggle out of a lot of trouble. He and Chapman are sort of like spiritual twins in that regard. But just to spend one more second on the managing, you know, you finally tie the score on LeMahieu's clutch home run in Game 6. Why on earth would you have Chapman pitch to Altuve in that spot with the base empty and Jake Marisnick on deck, who wasn't hitting at all? I mean, I have no doubt that Astros fans were praying that Boone did not put up the 4 fingers there, and he obliged them, and it totally burned us. And so I do think that Boone has some work to do as far as skillful managing in the postseason, which is a very different animal. You know, Joe Torre was great at it for the most part. But you know what? Clean slate. Boone did show significant improvement as a manager last year during the regular season, and the past is gone. ALCS is gone. 2019 gone. The teens are gone, and what we have right now, as I said up front, is a brand new decade with the baseball universe appearing to align very much in favor of the Yankees. Now, you know, predicting championships in baseball is an absolute fool's errand. I mean, who would have picked Washington in June when that bullpen was like imploding every day to win it all? But, you know, with a weakened Houston team, remember, one of the benefits of acquiring Cole is that the Astros, you know, lost him, and the Red Sox didn't get him either. And, you know, not that Boston was really in the hunt, but as far as the 2020 outlook, I always say, if you really want to know what is most likely to happen, look to Vegas. Look to the bookmakers who make a living at this prediction racket. And the day after Cole was signed, the Yankees became the odds-on favorite to win the World Series. Now, for some reason, Vegas set the line for regular season wins at 99.5, which I don't understand at all. I mean, the Yankees won 103 games last year without Cole and with just an absurd number of injuries, literally like a team-wide conveyor belt to the injured list. And while we're on that, some news, a bit of reshuffling among our coaches. The Yankees last week fired Matt Krause, strength and conditioning coach, after a season where 30 Yankees made a total of 39 appearances on the injured list, which I believe is a major league record. And Krause follows Larry Rothschild out the door. Rothschild now in San Diego. He will be replaced by Matt Blake, who has no major league pitching coach experience, but did help develop pitchers for the Indians. And he's a guy that Cashman is very high on, so we'll see how that goes. And bench coach Josh Bard is also gone. He will go back to his old job as the Dodgers bullpen coach, and his replacement is our former infield coach, Carlos Mendoza. But without further ado, let's get into the marquee big story for the Yankees this offseason, and that is, without a doubt, the signing of 29-year-old Gerrit Cole, a signing which I did not think was going to happen. Even when some of the more reliable baseball writers were kind of pushing it, Joel Sherman among them, and when all signs were pointing towards this deal, I still thought that, given Cashman's track record or lack thereof with starting pitchers, with his kind of infatuation with bullpen arms and home run power, that Cashman would find some excuse to bail. But thankfully, I was dead wrong. So finally, after years in the ace wilderness, we have a bona fide ace, and we can stop squinting at Severino and pretending that we see an ace. Some people hate when I say that, but until he proves otherwise on a sustained basis, Severino is not an ace. I said this after his craptastic performance in Game 3 of the Houston series, where he lasted just 4 innings. In my more pessimistic moments about Severino, I think he might be just a glorified Michael Pineda, namely a talented tease. But Cole is the real enchilada, filthy good. Only one pitcher in Major League history had at least 325 strikeouts and fewer than 150 hits allowed in a single season, and that man is Gerrit Cole last year. 2.5 ERA in a season where hitters were just having a field day. That ERA is actually slightly lower than Verlander's, who won the Cy Young. Now, granted, the AL West is kind of terrible. The A's were okay, and that's about it. That may change in 2020. I'll cover that later, but there's no getting around the fact that we have our stud now. I'm not exactly a WAR person, wins above replacement, but many people that I respect are. And for those who are, the stats people had him at 6.9 wins above replacement last year. The Yankees' entire starting pitching staff last year had a combined WAR of 7.9, and Cole himself had 6.9. So in the past, let's say 40 years, the Yankees have had aces, but the majority of the time they were past their prime. Or let's say in their last gasp of greatness, David Wells, David Cohn, Mussina, or frankly, they were over the hill, Randy Johnson, Kevin Brown, or they were artificially propped up by drugs, Roger Clemens. But Gerrit Cole is in his prime, and the Yankees have had their eye on him for years. They took him in the first round of the 2008 draft, only to see him head off to UCLA and then get swept up by the Pirates in 2011. They tried to trade for him 2 years ago and got skunked by the Astros, but this time Cashman would not be denied. This was old school evil empire stuff. On top of the massive $324 million, the Yankees, they rolled out Cole's childhood idol, Andy Pettitte, who made the trip to California to woo him. They found out his favorite kind of wine. I think it was a kind of Merlot. And they gave that to him. They trotted out their new pitching coach to California, Matt Blake, to explain all the tools that Cole would have access to in New York. They did it all. Obviously the money was the prime ingredient, but they landed the big fish, a guy who posted the highest strikeout rate ever recorded by a qualified starting pitcher last year, a guy who did not record a single loss from May 27th to October 15th. So that's, hats off to Cashman and hats off to Steinbrenner. It's his money. And is it a crazy amount of money? Absolutely. It's crazy. But it isn't yours. It isn't mine. And, frankly, if that's what it takes to fill this crucial role, then that's what it takes. And as far as the years, 9 years, so essentially Gerrit Cole will spend the rest of his career in New York. Yes, there's always risk. There was risk with Stanton, and that appears not to be panning out. But, Cole has been remarkably healthy, physically and mentally. You could see from his press conference, I don't know if you watched that, but he exudes confidence. And he's also a fiend for analytics and studying up on hitters. And, he showed you that he can pitch in big games on the biggest stage that baseball has to offer, the World Series. And so all of these things, to me, say that if any one pitcher is going to age gracefully and stay effective, I think Gerrit Cole is that pitcher. And by the way, for those of you who wanted the Yankees to make a big splash last year with either Manny Machado or Bryce Harper, you can kind of see now that Cashman was playing the long game, and the long game in this case has worked out very well. And as for the rest of the rotation, we'll see. I mean, it's good. Severino, now he has a little less pressure on his shoulders. He's not, looked at as the ace anymore, so maybe that kind of loosens him up. Hopefully he's healthy. Paxton, he started pretty shaky last year, but, by the end of the year, he kind of got his groove going. And Tanaka is Tanaka. Regular season, he'll alternate between brilliance and then giving up moonshot after moonshot. But in the playoffs, he's pretty much your classic money pitcher. I mean, postseason ERA for his career, 1.76. Okay, you can't get much better than that. I mean, that's better than Verlander by a lot. That's better than Scherzer by a lot. That's actually better than Cole. Now, the only current big-time pitcher I could find that had a better postseason ERA was the reigning World Series MVP, Steven Strasburg, at 1.46. Now, as far as that fifth spot in the rotation, it's probably going to be a committee, until Herman has served his suspension, which they have not announced yet. I predict that Happ will not be a Yankee on opening day. I think that Cashman will find a way to get him and maybe Andujar out of town for some more pitching, maybe some bullpen help to replace Betances. But look, I mean, Cole, Paxton, Tanaka, Severino, and Herman, that can stack up against pretty much any rotation in the majors. But remember, that's on paper. They actually have to go out on the mound and deliver, so we'll see. But let's get into some of the other signings the Yankees made. They re-signed Brett Gardner to another one-year deal for $12.5 million. This was, to me, a no-brainer after the power surge we saw from Gardner in 2019. Just to keep it real, he did nothing in the playoffs. I mean, but he had a lot of company there. Encarnacion was terrible. He had 0.56, Encarnacion. Sanchez hit 130 in the ALCS. With some truly awful at-bats, non-competitive at-bats. Gardner at 135, Hicks only had 13 at-bats, but at 154, and Judge, Urshela, Didi, all under 250. I mean, we really missed Mike Tauchman and Mike Ford in the postseason. Those two guys, it's hard to overstate what they added to the club late in the season last year, and they were both not there. The only guys that really hit in that series were LeMahieu, who the Yankees, they must absolutely find a way to extend him. Just a crucial cog in our success last year. I mean, supremely gifted contact hitters who play Gold Glove level infield do not grow on trees, so sign him long term. But the Gardner deal is similar to the one he signed last year, 1 year with a club option for $10 million for 2021, with a $2.5 million buyout attached to it. So not a big commitment either way. And look, I mean, he did post career highs last year in home runs with 28. 74 RBIs, and his OPS was a rock-solid 829 as our fourth outfielder. And with Hicks recovering from Tommy John, which he had, I think, on Halloween, that's an 8 to 10 month time frame for recovery. And if you look at how ineffective Didi was after he came back from his Tommy John last year, it wouldn't shock me at all if Hicks was a total non-factor this year. I mean, that was a dumb deal by Cashman. I mean, Hicks, he's signed through 2026, okay? And he averages 93 games a year in his career. Constantly injured, constantly. But, you can kind of see why this deal for Gardner, who is a rock-solid human being and just a team leader and was great last year for the most part, was, as I said, a no-brainer. Now, before I catch you up on some of the other deals around the majors, two solid Yankees who I liked are gone. Didi Gregorius and Dellin Betances. Betances I will deal with in our mailbag segment, but with Didi, who had a down year, the Yankees are trying desperately after this Gerrit Cole deal to stay beneath that second luxury tax threshold and the painful penalties that they would be forced to pony up if they exceeded it. And if you want to look at a team in significant payroll distress after having exceeded that second penalty, that second level several years in a row, just look up at Boston. I mean, and the Red Sox right now are frantically trying to unload albatross David Price good luck with that. That's not going to happen. But Didi, he turns 30 next month. He's now a Philly. He didn't figure into the Yankees' long-term plans. I mean, we have a very talented infield with Voit, LeMahieu, Glaber, and Urshela. And they weren't going to, plunk down a bunch of money for Didi. They just weren't. And actually, the Phillies only signed him for 1 year at $14 million. So they obviously were hedging their bets as well. So I wish him well, but I think that the Yankees did the right thing here with both Didi and with Gardner. Now, for those people on Yankees Twitter lusting after Francisco Lindor, the shortstop for the Indians, this is a pipe dream, okay? And it's a case of people just wanting a big name to salivate over and tweet about, like what we saw last year with Harper and Machado. I mean, there's no room for him. People can say, someone commented at me when I said that Lindor is the kind of talent you have to make room for. Actually, no, you don't. Not if there's no room. I mean, you're not going to platoon or bench Gleyber Torres after the year he had last year. You're just not. That's insane. And the idea of, putting, if we got Lindor, putting him at shortstop, putting Gleyber back at second and LeMahieu at first, that's a waste of one of the best middle infielders in the game. And the Yankees are just not going to do that. Cashman is not going to add more payroll it would cost for Lindor, who had a great year, but offensively, he's actually not as good as Gleyber. He's not. So just get it out of your mind. Not happening, nor should it. Now, one other Yankee move which has not gotten a lot of press is the departure of Austin Romine for Detroit. It appears that Romine will be their starting catcher this year. That's a 1-year deal for $4 million. And Romine, he's a guy that I've always liked. His production with men on base has been excellent. He's a team player. He never complains. And I got to say, I'm a little concerned about the idea of Higashioka as our backup. He hit .214 last year in his 56 at-bats. And considering how much time Sanchez has spent on the IL the last couple of years, that could be a weak spot. But again, we're only halfway through the offseason. Maybe Cashman has other plans. Around the majors, the biggest free agent signings and trades are, first of all, a trio of pitchers, 3 former aces who have seen better days. Corey Kluber is now a Texas Ranger, which I think Texas fans maybe restrain yourselves from jumping up and down just yet. He's coming off a very tough season where first he took a line drive off the forearm that kept him out until August, only to come back and suffer an oblique strain that cost him the rest of the season. But look, I'm rooting for the Rangers here. I mean, really anybody in that division, I'm rooting for to step up and beat up the Astros, who at this point I can honestly say I hate almost as much as the Red Sox. So I'm pulling for the Angels, I'm pulling for the Rangers, I'm pulling for the A's. I expect nothing from Seattle, who are rebuilding. But considering, what Kluber is capable of, I think Texas won this trade with the Indians. All they gave up was Delino DeShields, who is lightning fast but does not hit or walk. And they gave up a righty pitching prospect that I've never heard of, Emmanuel Clace. So pretty meager for a guy who's won multiple Cy Youngs. But I do think that the Indians, like the Mariners, they're not really trying to build a contender right now. They're definitely entering a rebuild. I think they're trying to move Lindor as well. Likely destination for Lindor, I would say, is Los Angeles to the Dodgers. The other 2 aces with new homes are, first of all, Madison Bumgarner, who signed a 5-year, $85 million deal with the D-backs, so playing for his former team's division rival. Bumgarner coming off his worst season as a pro, but he's a horse, and he should give them lots of innings. I think that's a decent deal for Arizona because there's a lot of deferred money in that contract and some bonus clauses. So I think that's a good deal. And Dallas Keuchel is now a member of the White Sox, as is Gio Gonzalez, by the way. Keuchel signed to a 3-year, $55 million deal in Chicago. And with the Indians on the downturn and the White Sox starting to spend, they're making really aggressive moves to try and surround their talented homegrown players with veteran talent. They also signed catcher Yasmani Grandal last month. I think there's an outside chance that the AL Central could witness a changing of the guard this year, or at least be more competitive. I still think the Twins, a.k.a. the Yankees' perennial playoff punching bags, are in the driver's seat in that division, at least until the postseason when they will present yet another spectacular belly flop. But the White Sox, who really are one of the most improved teams this offseason, along with the Yankees, and I would say the Angels, the Phillies, and the Blue Jays are also improved. But the White Sox acquired Edwin Encarnacion on a one-year deal as well. And the word is that Chicago also has eyes for the bat licker, Yasiel Puig. But the biggest position player signing so far was probably Anthony Rendon, who was a huge piece of the Nationals championship run, along with Suzuki was great, the rookie Soto was great, and of course their starters. I should also probably mention here that the Nats re-signed Strasburg to a 7-year, $245 million deal, which was the most lucrative deal in baseball for like 2 seconds. But that was nice to see, that Strasburg will play his entire career in one city. And also Hyunjin Ryu signed with the Blue Jays, who, as I said, are improved as well, and will, I predict, beat out Boston for third place in the AL East. That Ryu deal is 4 years, $80 million. But back to the clutch-hitting Rendon. He's 29, and after the Angels kind of swung and whiffed on Gerrit Cole, they never seem to be able to sign pitchers. They just never have a decent staff in Anaheim. But they made a different kind of splash with Rendon, who hit .319 last year. OPS was around 1,000. He was even better in the postseason. And he will now join Mike Trout, as well as Justin Upton and Andrelton Simmons. But I do believe that once again, lack of pitching will sink the Angels' chances at the division. And the Mets, who I'll get to later, had a flurry of signings and one departure, Zach Wheeler, to the Phillies. Almost all the Mets signings this offseason were in the pitching department, which we'll get to after the break, along with the Houston Cheaters and their magical sign-stealing center field camera in our mailbag segment coming right up. Back in a moment.
Your feedback is important to us. On Twitter, @Gotham Variety, on our Facebook page, or you can email the program, joe@gothamvariety.com. Really, however you'd like to engage with us, we love engaging with you. And if you'd like to join our family and get exclusive access to bonus content, please go to patreon.com/GothamVariety and subscribe.
Our question of the week here on Gotham Hardball, actually 2 questions, come from Dorothy in Brookhaven and Marco in the Bronx. And by the way, you can find us on Twitter, @GothamHardball is the handle, or send me an email, joe@gothamvariety.com. If you have any questions you want to have us answer on any future episodes, we are more than happy to do so. And Dorothy writes, I am so disgusted by the Houston Cheaters. They have been doing this for years, in the regular season and the playoffs, even the World Series, breaking the rules and lying about it. I am hearing all kinds of possible punishments, but I have no faith in Major League Baseball doing the right thing, as they are corrupt and all about the money. What do you think is a fair punishment? Well, thanks for that question, Dorothy. It's a good one. So I feel your anger. I share your anger, but here's the thing. And this, this looks bad, very bad. But I know we live in a world today, especially on social media, but actually the traditional media too, where everything's, a rush to judgment. Shoot first, ask questions later, or never ask questions a lot of the time. The new Clint Eastwood movie I mentioned at the top that I will review here on Gotham Variety next week. It's called Richard Jewell. It's about that very phenomenon. But the fact is that this investigation will most likely be imperfect, as you said, Dorothy. It seems like the only time that you get a real investigation in sports is with an outside entity. But having said that, the powers that be in Major League Baseball do seem to be taking this scandal very seriously. And I think it would be unwise of me to recommend a punishment or punishments before Commissioner Manfred has released his report. So for those who haven't followed this, Mike Fiers, that's the same Mike Fiers that broke Giancarlo Stanton's face with a fastball 5 years ago, informed the online magazine The Athletic that Houston, during his time there, he's now in Oakland, but he pitched in Houston in 16 and 17, their title year, that the Astros used a video camera in center field to steal opposing teams' signs. They relayed those signs to the clubhouse, and then various signals were used, sometimes whistles, sometimes banging on a garbage can, to signify to the hitters what was coming. And the use of cameras and the use of sound are in direct violation of two major league rules. Again, this is alleged at this point, but it looks very bad. And the fact is, there's been talk about this going on in Houston for years, okay? Andrew Friedman, who's the president of baseball operations for the Dodgers, said there was a lot of speculation during the World Series that year in 2017 when they lost to Houston that this was going on. I mean, as we all know, sign stealing is practically an art form, and it's been going on literally forever. But as I said, use of cameras and use of sound are expressly forbidden. By the way, the Nationals, apparently, were well aware of this issue as well in the World Series and were very much on their guard with multiple sets of signs to foil the Astros cheating. So look, Dorothy, we'll see what happens. I mean, Manfred is calling this the most thorough investigation that their office has ever undertaken. They've already interviewed over 50 witnesses. They have reviewed more than 70,000 emails. That's another part of the scandal, by the way. It's been reported that at least one Astros executive asked scouts for help stealing signs on the road. They weren't satisfied just doing this at Minute Maid Park. They wanted to do this on the road as well. He actually sent that in an email, just dumb as a rock. So this is bad, guys. This is beyond dishonest. It's reprehensible. It is performance enhancement, frankly. It's just as much performance enhancement as steroids are. And if it's true, all the hitters on that team benefited. Like I said, I will wait for the report to come out, but I'm pretty sure that this is a, where there's smoke, there's fire kind of deal. And most likely that everybody in that dugout knew about this. The manager, and Hinch, he likes to act all holier than thou with that little smug baby face. But if he knew about this, he should never manage another major league game in his life, in my opinion. And if this went on in the series back in 2017, Major League Baseball, what they should do is vacate that championship. They won't do that. But short of that, they should put a big fat asterisk next to that championship in the official record books. Because as Tino Martinez said when this came to light a few months ago, a reporter happened to catch him on the way to some function here in New York. Tino said, if I knew what was coming, I'd be in the Hall of Fame. Okay, so it's going to be fascinating to read this report and see what kind of fines or loss of draft picks or suspensions are handed down. And it will also be fascinating to see how some of these Houston hitters do this season when they don't know what's coming. So, I'm assuming after this fiasco that the league will be much more vigilant about this and they won't do it again. So exactly a century after the Black Sox scandal, we have another sort of scandal. And if true, this absolutely tarnishes everything. Everything the Astros have quote-unquote accomplished in the last few years, tarnished, beyond repair, forever. Disgusting. Next up is a question from Marco in the Bronx, who writes, I am sorry to see Dellin Betances leave the Bronx, but at least the hometown boy will stay in New York. The Mets have made a crazy amount of pitching moves this year. Will they actually be any good? Well, thanks for that question, Marco. It's a good one, and it's actually not that easy to answer. I have certainly been following the Mets' moves with interest this offseason, along with this projected change in ownership, which we'll get to later. But Betances, he's a good guy. As you said, he's a local guy. He's been a good, upstanding Yankee. He handles the media great, even when he's not doing well. He really had a great run here, just unhittable for a while until injuries kind of knocked him off a cliff. That shoulder injury last year, then a second injury while he was working his way back, and then a torn Achilles in a kind of freak accident. But the truth is, again, just to keep it real here, before last year's injury-riddled season, he had his share of problems. If you remember, back in 2017, we almost had a Mark Wohlers type situation on our hands here with Dellin Betances, when he just completely lost the strike zone by like several feet at times. But when he's on, he's deadly. And the Mets just have to hope they get the good Dellin, not the wild Dellin, because they desperately need help in that bullpen. It is entirely possible that with a decent bullpen last year, they get a wild card spot. But Edwin Diaz he was a wide-awake nightmare in that closer role, ERA up near 6. Familia was also completely unreliable. So this here, this is a real opportunity for Betances to shine. I think he's got a real role there if he can pitch well. And the Mets signed him to a 1-year, $10.5 million deal. Now, he's still in the latter stages of recovering from that torn Achilles. The Mets are saying that he will be ready to go for spring training. That would surprise me, considering that injury. But the Mets pitching staff, Marco, it's really a fascinating set of question marks. Remember, they traded for another native New Yorker, Marcus Stroman, before the deadline. He was sort of up and down for the Mets. And this offseason, the Mets acquired 2 veteran depth starters. The first, Michael Wacha, formerly of the St. Louis Cardinals, who is talented, but he's had a lot of injuries over his career. And the other pitcher they signed the day after Wacha is 31-year-old New Jersey native Rick Porcello, who, if I were a Mets fan, I would be a lot more hopeful about Porcello than Wacha. At the very least, Porcello will give you innings. He's taken the ball for at least 32 starts in each of the past 4 campaigns and has only failed once to top 170 innings in a season. So, you've got Wacha and Porcello joining reigning Cy Young winner Jacob deGrom, who had an amazing year last year and a truly remarkable second half. 7-1, 1.44 ERA, and 117 strikeouts. And deGrom became the first pitcher in Major League history to win back-to-back Cy Youngs, which kind of surprised me a little. You would think that someone like Koufax or Bob Gibson would have done that before, but no, deGrom is the first. And if he keeps this up, you're looking at a future Hall of Famer, no doubt. Noah Syndergaard was less effective, 4.30 ERA over 31 starts, 193 strikeouts. That's a lot, but he wasn't bad. Then you've got Steven Matz, who had a kind of similar season. So there's talent on that Mets rotation, Marco, with a bona fide ace in deGrom. Bullpen much more problematic, but Mets fans just have to cross their fingers and hope that Betances helps in that role. The Mets also picked up center fielder Jake Marisnick from the Houston Astros. But the Mets, they have some hitters. Obviously, Pete Alonso had a monster rookie year, 941 OPS. That's amazing. And he broke Aaron Judge's rookie record for home runs. I think he hit 53, and he had 120 runs batted in. So he's a beast. And shortstop Ahmed Rosario continues to improve. Michael Conforto, he gets on base a lot. Okay, he's a really good on-base guy. His OBP was 363 last year, okay? Unfortunately, he also strikes out a lot, but he's capable of serious productivity. Cano's a problem, I think. He's been a major disappointment in Queens. That's just a bad deal. The Mets, they owe him $24 million a year through 2023. 4 more years of that. Although the Mariners, I think, will cover a few million of that every year. But last year was sort of Jekyll and Hyde for Cano. The first half was just bad, injury-plagued, strikeout-plagued, but there was definitely improvement in the second half. He took a 646 OPS in the first half to 880 in the second half. But that's a big chunk of payroll right there, as is Yoenis Cespedes, an even worse deal for the Mets. They sunk $110 million into that guy, and he's missed most of his time with various injuries. So Cespedes is kind of the Mets' Jacoby Ellsbury. So Marco, the Mets, they're in a very tough division, one of the toughest in baseball, probably second only to the NL Central, which has Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Chicago. But the Mets have to deal with the reigning World Series champs in Washington. They have to deal with a resurgent Braves club. They have to deal with the Phillies, who are also much better. The Marlins, they're going to be trash again, but still, that's 3 major roadblocks. But on the bright side, the Mets, they had those same 3 roadblocks basically last year, and despite a bullpen that leaked like a sieve, they finished 10 games over 500 and just 3 games back of Milwaukee for a wild card spot. So I think, Mets fans, on the strength of a very deep rotation, a potentially improved bullpen, and a better than decent lineup, should be cautiously optimistic. If the stars align, maybe the Mets this year sneak in Marco, as a second wild card. I think that's their absolute best case scenario. But beyond 2020, the Mets' future is looking brighter as it appears there will be a shift in ownership with hedge fund billionaire Steve Cohen in serious negotiations with the Wilpons to transfer controlling rights and a majority stake of the team in the next 5 years to Cohen. That deal is not yet done, but if it goes through, that's a guy, Steve Cohen, with gobs of money. He's notoriously competitive. He hates to lose. So that could be a major uptick in the Mets' fortunes. And so I think, Marco, cautious optimism should be the watchword for Mets fans. But they should certainly be an interesting club to follow this year. They always are. You can subscribe to Gotham Variety on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Find us on Spotify. Follow us on Twitter @Gotham Hardball is the handle. You can also follow us @Gotham Variety if you are interested in our audio dramas, our movie reviews, and our interviews. Check out our website, gothamvariety.com. And thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year, and we'll see you real soon. Take care.